Hi, my name is Leesha, and today I'm going to talk with you about CrowdCheer, which is a system that provides continual support for runners by engaging ad hoc crowds of spectators at races. So people in communities that really value support often want to balance supporting the needs of others while still trying to achieve their own goals. We see this in workplace and learning communities. So for example, a graduate student might want to help a peer with their study design in between making their own research progress. We also see this in crowd settings. So for example, a spectator might want to cheer for other runners while they wait for their own runner to race past. In both of these crowd and community settings, these people who want to balance both of these goals of helping others and achieving their own goals are really willing, able, and available to support the needs of others. They may be willing because they value supporting the different kinds of needs that might arise in that community. They may have the knowledge or skills to help, which means that they're able to, and they may have periods of time where they are available to offer help towards those community needs. So for example, a graduate student may really value getting early feedback on a study design, and therefore they might be willing to support a peer. They may have done a study design in the past and therefore have the expertise and can offer advice. They may also have moments where they can help out in between their own research work. And in the race setting, a spectator may know how important it is to hear cheers when running in a race, and therefore be really willing to support other runners. They may have cheered in the past and therefore know how to motivate runners in effective ways, and they may have moments where they can cheer for other runners while they wait for their own runner. And we think about these individuals as part of an ad hoc crowd within a community. And these are people who, while engaged in a primary activity in the community, are willing, able, and available to support the needs of others at these opportune moments. The challenge, though, is even though they are willing, able, and available to help others while still achieving their own goals, the moments where the needs of others arise and the moments where their own goals demand their attention are continuously changing over time and sometimes concurrent, which means that it can be really hard to just know about different support opportunities and these opportunities to provide help. It can be really difficult to evaluate opportunities when considering these goals and upcoming needs and know when to help versus attend to your own goals. And it can be really difficult to be prepared to support needs on demand when you're switching between these tasks of supporting others' needs on demand while still trying to achieve your own goals. So for example, a graduate student may be willing to help their peers, but when the moments where the needs of their peers arise and their own research tasks demand their attention are continuously changing day to day, it can be hard to keep track of their own research tasks in addition to the needs of their peers across a research group. Similarly, in the spectator situation, the spectator may be willing to cheer for other runners, but when the moments of where the needs of the other runners arise, and when their own runner is approaching, continuously change throughout the race, and can sometimes happen at the same time, it can be really hard to identify moments where they can cheer for others versus when they should be cheering for their own runner. If we can overcome these types of challenges and successfully engage ad hoc crowds, we might be able to enable this desire to support community needs that already exists within these ad hoc crowd members. And further, we might even be able to meet more needs with existing community resources. To overcome these challenges in engaging ad hoc crowds, we contribute continual support, a conceptual approach and a technical framework that helps us monitor the ongoing streams of needs and goals of the different community members. It helps us identify these opportune moments for community members to support the community needs while still attending to their primary goals. And it primes and cues helpers with the context they may need to provide that support on demand. And so for the rest of this talk, I will first motivate the need for a continual support approach, And I will do this by presenting the findings that we had from a need finding study where we studied ad hoc crowds of spectators in race settings. And then we'll identify gaps in existing CSEW and crowdsourcing approaches for this type of support. After that, I will present CrowdCheer, which is a mobile app that engages these ad hoc crowds of spectators to cheer for runners at races. And followed by that, I'll present the results of a pilot study that we conducted at a 10K race, which actually demonstrated that spectators using CrowdCheer were able to cheer for other runners and their own runners. So to study continual support systems, we focused on this practical setting of spectators at races who are really trying to balance these two goals, cheering for other runners while still being able to support their own runner. And in race settings, we can assume that runners need support throughout the race, which allows us to really have this simple model of needs. And with a simple model of needs, we can then focus on the specific challenges that spectators might face in supporting needs in a community when they also have their own goals. In race setting, spectators are also really value supporting other runners. And in these race settings, the spectators that do value supporting other runners are willing, able, and available to cheer for other runners while still supporting their own runners. So they're in this setting where they're trying to balance both of these goals. And they face this challenge of the moments when they might want to cheer for other runners and the moments when they want to cheer for their own runner are continuously changing throughout the race. And they could occur at the same time, so it can be difficult to know when to do what. Now, while there's a wide variety of approaches to assist spectators in supporting runners at races, these approaches aren't really designed to assist spectators in balancing these two goals of cheering for other runners while still trying to cheer for their own runner. There are some approaches that focus on crowdsourcing support for runners through relay batons and drone companions, for example, that provide ways to notify runners of moments where a crowd member might be supporting them during the run. The challenge, though, is that these approaches focus on remote cheers where the spectator may not be present at the race, or they primarily will do things like display cheer counts, which literature and our own need finding found to be less supportive and effective than direct cheers that are coming from the crowd of spectators present at the race that might be directly targeted towards the runner, or it's clear that that cheer is meant for them. There are also many practical applications used in race settings that now allow you to search for and add many runners as pins on your map screen while you trek during the race. The challenge, though, is that these applications show all the opportunities for both your own runner and other runners all at once on the map, and they don't really support ways to make decisions about when to cheer for whom, and they don't provide enough information for you to spot and identify other runners that you may not recognize. And so we conducted a series of need finding at a series of races in these live race settings with runners and spectators and took a design-based research approach. And we conducted 3 of these major iterative cycles over the course of 4 years, where we first focused on, how do we just help runners keep track of different cheering opportunities? And then how do we prepare them to actually cheer for a runner that they've selected? And then once we've kind of supported them with those base tasks, then how do we help them make decisions about when to support other runners versus cheering for their own runner? And so one of the first things we found was that a lot of spectators were actually really willing to support other runners. So one spectator said, "I love the idea of having specific people cheering for specific runners. I would be happy to cheer for runners at other races and like the idea of having someone specific to look and cheer for." And we got a lot of these types of responses when we were initially testing and prototyping with spectators, and a lot of them shared this enthusiasm and a value for supporting runners in impactful ways. The challenge that we found over and over again, though, was that it was hard to keep track of other runners and their own runner. And as a result, they would tend to directly cheer for runners who might have standout costumes that were kind of easy to spot and cheer for, or they would just kind of stand on the sidelines and generically cheer for other runners, which in our need-finding runners actually referred to as zombie claps, where spectators are just kind of like clapping along, and for the runner, it's not clear whether that cheer is intended for them or not. And so for these ad hoc crowds and communities, we understood that while they may be willing to support the needs in a community, it was hard for them to be continually aware of these opportunities that are changing with the community needs and as the individual's goals are changing. So prior work in CSCW has explored approaches for connecting people to different helpers and communities, but they don't consider the dynamic nature of changing needs and goals across a community. For example, there's a class of systems called expertise recommenders, which help individuals input requests and then find experts who might be available to help them and then provide them with the information they might need to contact them. And then there are also systems like peer research, which allow the entire community to gather together and report not only what they need, but their ability to help the needs of others within the community, and then algorithmically match based on who can best help who. In our setting, though, over time, these needs are continuously changing in the community. And so we can't always rely on users to report their ongoing needs, as you might in expertise recommender systems or in a peer research setting. So for example, we can't expect a runner to note every moment where they may need additional support from the crowd as they're running. Similarly, the availability for a person to help actually depends on the changing status of their own goals in our setting. And these general models of availability, where it may just report a person's contact information and maybe their availability on a scale of 1 to 5, do not really consider the status of goals that may change a person's availability. Similarly, in settings like peer research, people can't, or in contrast to settings like peer research, people can't always just set aside dedicated help sessions to support one another as they work. For example, we don't expect spectators to be generally available to cheer when they have their own runners to worry about, or to set aside these fixed buckets of time to help out. And so we really need approaches that can model and monitor both the changing needs and goals within a community, so that we can identify these moments to connect community needs to the available helpers in the community. And so another thing that we found in our need finding was that these people, these spectators in the crowd, were actually had a lot of availability to support these other runners. And so they reported having a lot of idle time during races. So for example, during a 3-hour race, like a half marathon, they may spend about 5 minutes out of that 3-hour window cheering for their runner. And the rest of the time, they reported often doing things like just kind of going on their phone. They might be reading. They might go wait at coffee shops. Some of them did activities like knit, or they would do that generic cheering where they're just kind of clapping along. And so while spectators are generally available to provide that support, they're actually just conditionally available, and it really just depends on the status of their primary runner. So in our need finding, it became clear that for these spectators who have come to the race, their primary goal is to cheer for their own runner, and cheering for other runners was a secondary goal in their mind. And so they weren't necessarily generally available to provide support to other runners, but it was conditionally, and it kind of depended on how far away their runner was and if they felt like they had the time to cheer for another runner in that moment. And so for these ad hoc crowds and communities, we learned that while they might be generally available, their availability actually more realistically depends on their own goals and whether or not they need to attend to their own goals in the moment, or if they have that availability to support the needs of others. And so prior work for on-demand crowd support in the crowdsourcing literature has explored these approaches for generating on-demand support with paid crowds, but they don't consider volunteer settings where individuals may be conditionally available. And so a lot of real-time crowdsourcing work uses these approaches like retainer model or quick target that access crowds on demand to meet streams of needs. And these are good for tasks like transcribing or coding live video or captioning images. But in our setting, community members are volunteering their time to support community needs. And as a result, they often have their own goals that they're trying to keep track of as well. And so we can't assume that volunteers will be generally available to support community needs on demand as you might be able to in a paid setting. And so we need approaches that really model this conditional availability based on these volunteer crowds. We need approaches that model this conditional availability of these volunteer crowds that is really based on their ongoing goals and help us identify these opportune moments for them to support community needs that arise. And so the last thing that the last sort of major theme that we found in our need finding was that these spectators were often really able to support other runners because they were familiar with cheering tasks. So they would often have tips and tricks for spotting and cheering for other runners. So for example, they would refer to using strategies like pace charts to calculate out an approximate location for a runner at a particular time. They would use visual cues from pace groups that the runner might be in and looking for the banner of the pace group or looking for people that they recognize before or after their runner as kind of these visual cues. And they, for other runners, would often use identifying information like calling out a person who was in a costume like a chicken suit or something like that, or if they recognized a particular country or team on their jersey, they would often rely on these types of cues to spot and cheer for particular runners. So the spectators have a lot of strategies for being able to cheer for runners, but the challenge is it can be really hard to use apply those strategies to cheer for other runners on demand. So when you see another runner appear in an app, for example, it can be really hard to if your goal is to cheer for that runner, you may not know what that runner is wearing. You may not know how far away they are or when to start scanning the crowd. You might not know their runner's name or what to say when to cheer. And on top of all of that, it can be really hard to switch between tracking different runners when you don't have that context readily available and you don't know when exactly to switch between these different tasks. And so for these ad hoc crowds and communities, we understood that while they're able to support community needs and they may have a lot of these strategies available that mean that they're kind of well equipped to do so, it can be really hard to prepare to provide support when they're switching between support tasks without sufficient context. So prior work in the on-the-go crowdsourcing space has explored different approaches for preparing volunteers to do these types of on-demand tasks on their existing routes. But they don't really consider how to prepare volunteers when they may need to switch between community needs and their personal goals. In the on-the-go crowdsourcing space, community members can engage in simple tasks like picking up packages or searching for lost items on the way to work or class. In our setting, however, community members are often switching between attending to their own goals and supporting the needs of the community, which can be hard to do if they don't have the context they need to provide that support as it's needed. And so the simple context that is often used in on-the-go systems, like providing a description of a lost item or some details about where it might be, may not be sufficient to prepare community members with info they need to provide on-demand support to others in ways that are not disruptive to their own goals when they're trying to switch back and forth between these two types of tasks. And so we need approaches that can really prime community members with the context that they might need as they need it, and to cue them to take particular action as they switch between supporting others' needs and attending to their own goals. And so to overcome these challenges of to overcome these challenges that we found in need finding and that we found for ad hoc crowds who are interested in both providing support to others while still being able to attend to their own goals, we present the continual support approach in our work. And so to overcome this challenge of having to keep track of continuously changing needs and goals in the community, continual support explicitly monitors the ongoing streams of needs and goals of the community members. Unlike these prior approaches that require reported needs or maybe model general availability or rely on these dedicated community help sessions, being able to monitor needs and goals explicitly means that helpers can now be aware of both opportunities to provide support and the changing status of their own goals, which ends up informing their availability from moment to moment. To overcome the challenge of being able to decide when to attend to individual goals or when to support community needs, the continual support approach identifies these opportune moments for community members to support community needs while still attending to their primary goals. And so unlike these prior approaches that rely on paid workers that are generally available via retainer models, identifying opportunities, and in particular these opportune moments, means that volunteer helpers can make these effective decisions about when they can provide support while still meeting their own goals. And to overcome the challenge of being unprepared to effectively support a need on demand in these opportune moments, continual support explicitly primes and cues helpers with the context that they may need to support those needs on demand. Unlike prior approaches that engage volunteers in convenient and simple tasks along their routes, priming and cueing helpers means that they are prepared to give effective help as they are required to task switch between these opportune moments. And so to study the use of continual support and this continual support approach in engaging ad hoc crowds of spectators at races to cheer for other runners, we introduced CrowdCheer, which is a continual support system and an iOS app that monitors these different cheering opportunities for spectators based on the different runner needs and spectator goals. It identifies these opportune moments for spectators to cheer for other runners and their own runner, and it primes and cues spectators to spot and directly cheer for runners they don't know at the race. And so, firstly, CrowdCheer promotes awareness of opportunities through this dashboard view, which monitors both the real-time and changing status of their primary runner up top, and also monitors the continuous stream of nearby runners and these support opportunities along the bottom. To help spectators in really identifying these opportune moments and then make decisions about when to cheer for other runners that are nearby versus when to cheer for their own runner, CrowdCheer uses this technique called sideloading, which conditionally emphasizes these opportune moments based on the spectator's primary goal of cheering for their own runner. So you could see here that when the primary runner is far away, the UI emphasizes the text is switched here. I apologize. But you can see that when the runner is far away, that it actually emphasizes these nearby runners by displaying a red banner and then the distance in red to show that you can be cheering for these other runners while you're waiting. And the flip condition demonstrates that the primary runner is close by and emphasizes and then switches the emphasis to emphasize that the runner is close by switching the red banner up top and changing the cues by giving red buttons. And finally, to help spectators really prepare to cheer for other runners at these as these opportune moments arise, we introduced these different priming techniques that present context about the runner as they're approaching, such as a live map and distance tracker, which gives them a sense of their approaching location. We provide identifying information, such as their bib number, and a description of their outfit and a picture. And we also give these visual cues like the banners up top, which indicate to spectators that they can be looking for the runner at the moment, that they should be cheering right now, or that the runner has passed by and the cheering opportunity has ended. Okay, and we'll go through and watch a demo of how CrowdCheer works in the wild. So you see our spectator here sees that Alex's runner is far away, so he selects James to cheer for, who's a nearby runner, and he follows the cues to cheer for James as he approaches.
Yeah, come on, James, come on, do it for the beer!
And in this setting, he sees that his runner Alex is close by, so he selects Alex to prepare to cheer for him, and then uses the cues to spot and cheer for Alex.
Go, Alex, go! You're almost there!
And so behind the scenes within CrowdCheer, we use this continuous support framework that really helped us think about how to design and develop systems like CrowdCheer, which are these continual support systems. And we're able to do so with these 5 primary architectural components, which were monitor, match, prime, verify, and update. So the monitor component is primarily in charge of tracking information about the location and pace of all runners and spectators, and can generally be used to track and kind of monitor the changing needs and resources in a community setting. Match is then used for each spectator. It finds a set of nearby runners that they might be able to cheer for, and whether or not they might be able to support their own runner, and kind of looks for those event triggers of when they might want to do what. It evaluates that subset of runners to figure out who they can actually help right now, and if their goal demands their availability moment to moment. And that evaluation allows for these different presentation methods depending on these various conditions of what the status is of their ongoing goals and the opportunities to cheer for others. So for example, match enables the side loading technique that we saw earlier, where we could choose to emphasize other runners when the spectator's runner is far away. And finally, match logs when the spectator commits to supporting another runner. For continual support systems, that helps us kind of keep track of who is committed to supporting whom. The prime component accesses both the static and dynamic info about the runner from both the monitor and match components, and uses this to kind of provide contextual information, like identifiable information such as the runner's picture or bib number, or the dynamic information like their current location or changing pace, and uses that to kind of display that information in the interface and help the spectator do the cheering. Verify asks spectators if they have spotted their runner in CrowdCheer, and you can imagine Verify doing different stages of verification in terms of whether or not the support was delivered, received, or whether or not it had the appropriate affect or response to the person requesting that support in more general settings. And for update, CrowdCheer updates information on who has recently cheered or who might have received cheers, and it's actually used to initiate this temporary delay of notifications for people who just cheered for another runner as a way to kind of protect from inundating them with requests to cheer for others. And you might be able to use update to take these types of actions across this support ecosystem. And so the nice thing about this continual support framework is that it really helps us when designing these continual support systems to think about how we might want to make decisions about what to monitor for, how to coordinate support in ways that really connect community members to support opportunities, but are still cognizant of their own needs, how to prime and queue helpers in the community, and how we might want to assess that the help that is volunteered and then how might we be able to assess that the help was actually volunteered or that the needs were met across the community, and maybe use that to make these decisions for the community's general support ecology. And so we conducted a pilot study of CrowdCheer at in this pilot study we had some core hypotheses for the effect that CrowdCheer would have on the spectator's experience for cheering. So primarily, we hypothesized that spectators would be able to use CrowdCheer to cheer for other runners and their own runner. That they would be aware of these opportunities to cheer for other runners as well as their own runner, but through the dashboard. That helps them maintain that awareness. That they would be able to make effective decisions to support other runners in the community while still being able to support their own runner through this side-loading technique. And that they would be able to effectively support the runners they chose to cheer for on demand through these priming cues. And so for our pilot study, we conducted it at a 10K race in this large metropolitan city, and we recruited 16 participants. We had 5 spectators and 11 runners altogether. And we recruited at a packet pickup event the day before the race by setting up a recruiting table. Participants were given a $30 Amazon gift card as a base compensation for both spectators and runners for setting up the app and then doing the post surveys and interviews that we requested of them. Runners ended up receiving an extra $10 for every spectator that they were able to recruit to cheer for them, and they could recruit up to 5. And spectators were told that cheering for other runners would not affect their compensation as a precautionary measure. And so for the data collection itself, we conducted 15-minute post surveys with our 14 users, and we got responses from 5 spectators and 9 of the runners. And in these post surveys, we had spectators go through a recollection task by flipping through runner profiles and recalling to different degrees of detail whether or not they were able to spot and cheer for different runners that were in the app that day. And they also completed Likert scale and open-ended questions to recount the specific interaction details of what it might have been like to cheer for a particular runner. We then conducted 20 to 30 minute semi-structured interviews with 8 of our users and really focused on interviewing spectators as we were really studying their experience at the race, but also were able to interview some of our runners. And so we in the interviews, we're really trying to assess their overall experience and reactions from using CrowdCheer at the race, and then in particular how they were able to maintain awareness of their different goals and opportunities. Goals being awareness of their primary runner, and then opportunities to cheer for other runners. How CrowdCheer may have helped them identify these moments to cheer for their runner and other runners, and then how CrowdCheer might have prepared them to cheer on demand. And so in our findings, we found that spectators were able to cheer for both other runners and their own runners. So specifically, 4 of 5 or 80% of the spectators ended up cheering for both other runners and their own runner, and all spectators were able to cheer for their own runner. Across the different runners that we had at the race, 7 of the 11 of them who were participating and using the app at the race were actually cheered by other spectators at the race, as in spectators that were not their own spectator who came to cheer for them. We found overall, in terms of kind of like the overall experience, that spectators really valued supporting other runners at the race. So in a Likert scale question, they responded with a 5.7 out of 7, saying, "I enjoyed using CrowdCheer to cheer for other runners at the race." One spectator in particular said, "It was exciting, it felt good. It was like they knew someone, even though they didn't know me. But I think it's like that they recognized their cheers, so it was good to know that even some strangers had their support, and it felt good to be out there in support." And then in terms of the spectator experience of being able to kind of do both of these tasks, spectators reported that they were able to cheer for both their runners and other runners with ease. So in our post surveys, we asked this Likert scale question of, the app did not disrupt me with opportunities when I was cheering for my own runner, to which spectators responded an overwhelming 6.8 out of 7. And then in some of our open-ended responses and in our interviews, we got some more detail. So spectator D said, "It wasn't extra work to cheer for other runners. It was like, bam, it felt like a scoreboard with a starting player." And spectator A reflected and said, "I clicked on one of the other names just to see how it worked, and the app was like, oh, her runner is less than a mile away from you. Do you still want to continue to cheer for this person?" And then I was like, and then she grinned, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I love the fact that it kept giving you these, okay, your person is coming close. Do you want to keep cheering?" Or so in this example, spectator A was actually able to highlight how not only was it easy to do both tasks, but that the app was able to kind of cue her to switch between the two when she wanted to. We also found that spectators were aware of these opportunities to support other runners and their runner, and primarily through the dashboard. So spectator B said, "It was super easy. If I remember correctly, the top half had my runner and where she was, and the bottom half had the other runners. And so you know roughly how far away they were, and you could tap on them and see more. So I mean, it was just super easy to use." And so the spectator is specifically talking about how she was able to see both the status of her runner and opportunities for other runners through the dashboard. Spectators reported that they were able to identify these opportune moments to cheer for other runners because of the side-loading technique. So in a Likert scale question, we asked, "When I cheered for other runners in the app, I was confident that my runner was far away," to which spectators responded a 6.4 of 7. And spectator A said in particular, "I loved seeing the distance he was away from me change colors. It was like, okay, he's getting close. He's getting really close. It was like a push, like, hey, you need to start focusing on your runner." So spectator A is here highlighting the affordances in the UI where when it changes colors and shows that it's red, that she should really be paying attention to her own runner in that moment. And spectator B reflected and said, "If I was pulling out my phone to see where they were, I could see, they were like 2 miles, a mile and a half out or whatever. And so I knew that I didn't have to worry about missing them coming through. So that gave me the opportunity to see other runners that were nearby and to cheer for them. And so spectator B is reflecting on how she was able to, in kind of the opposite case, see that her runner was actually far away, and how that helped her realize that she had this opportunity to cheer for other runners. Spectator A reflected further and said, "So when my runner started getting close, I wasn't paying as much attention to other runners. Like if I saw them, there were a couple of faces that I recognized or remembered from the screen because I kept flipping back and forth between those profiles, my runners and someone else's. So I kind of had their face in my head. So I didn't completely ignore them because I knew they would be finishing around the same time, but I didn't pay as much attention when I saw that he was coming up." So here, spectator A is able to kind of reflect on how she was able to kind of switch her attention to whatever task she felt like demanded her attention in that moment. So in this case, seeing that her runner was getting close and deciding to not pay as much attention to other runners and really focus on her runner as he was approaching. And finally, spectators really felt prepared to spot and cheer for other runners on demand because of the different priming cues that we provided that kind of gave them the context and the cues to know when to cheer. So in the post surveys, we asked them, I had enough information to spot and cheer for other runners, to which spectators on average responded 6.2 of 7. And then spectators in the post surveys and the open-ended questions and also in the interviews were able to cite the specific things within CrowdCheer that really helped them know when to kind of look up or spot and cheer for other runners in these opportune moments. So spectator D said that in particular the photo of the runner and that they were nearby was particularly helpful. Spectator C said, "I liked the accuracy of the app. We were in the right place for them to see us, and normally you're just guessing." So this is really in contrast to what we saw in our need finding, where typically it's pretty hard to be in the right place and estimate when you might be able to cheer for another runner, but that it was helping Spectator C. That CrowdCheer was able to help Spectator C effectively. And spectator B said, "Well, it's pretty cool to be able to spot them based on their description. When I saw her, I don't know, I think I just happened to glance down at the app and saw that she was close, and then looked up, and then like a minute or so later, I just recognized her." So spectator B is kind of able to reflect on how she was able to very kind of quickly and easily use the description of the runner to be able to spot her. And this is for a person that she did not know. And so in summary, our findings demonstrated that using CrowdCheer, spectators were able to cheer for other runners and their own runners with ease. They were aware of these different opportunities to support other runners through the dashboard, that they were able to identify these opportune moments to cheer through the side-loading technique, and that they were prepared to spot and cheer for other runners on the fly or on demand using these priming cues. And so one thing that we really saw with our findings was that continual support systems are really able to enable these supportive communities. And so in our study, we really found that these individuals wanted to be able to support the needs of others between their own work, but that it was difficult for them because of the friction in trying to balance both of these outcomes. And our findings from the study in particular demonstrated that spectators could cheer for other runners in addition to their own, because continuous support systems really helped them, them being the ad hoc crowd, discover these support opportunities, identify the moments where they could help and when they should attend to their own goals, and prepared them for providing this on-demand support between their own work. And so continual support systems were really able to enable these ad hoc crowds to support community needs while still making sure they could attend to their own goals, which we found is really important for being able to create these more supportive communities. And so continual support systems are able to do this because they're actually designed to support everyone's goals. They explicitly interweave community needs and individual goals, which means these people are capable of being more supportive towards community needs. And so continual support systems are able to be more supportive in these ways and support these dynamic and on demand needs because they integrate the way we've thought about crowds and communities in the past. So, continual support systems consider these crowdsourcing approaches of being able to kind of monitor and coordinate support in these real time ways um, that really integrate community approaches to explicitly modeling the goals of community members. So the reason we're able to kind of do this monitoring and coordination is because now we're able to think about, okay, uh, how do we explicitly model um, the okay, wait, I'm gonna try again. So continual support systems are able to really consider the crowdsourcing approaches of how do you monitor and coordinate support in real time, which are strengths in crowdsourcing systems. And they could consider them in ways that really also integrate the approaches that you often see in CSEW and community settings of, okay, well, you might need to consider the different goals of community members or what their needs are, but doing it here in a way where we can model it as it's changing and therefore do the monitoring and coordinating. Okay, so with this hybrid way of thinking, crowdsourcing system design can actually, in the future, look beyond just kind of aligning tasks with an individual's goals and really explicitly integrating an individual's goals into these models, which is what we often see in communities research. And then on the flip side, future community system design can actually think about integrating ways to kind of explicitly track goals and in ways where we can start to think about, okay, how do we optimally coordinate real time help across a community in ways that might be scalable, as we often think about in crowd worker settings. So we we envision that future continual support systems would be able to extend to coordinate support as needs and helpers might scale within that community. So we saw that being able to identify these opportune moments for spectators to cheer for others, as well as their own runners, is really effective for enabling an ad hoc crowd to provide support. However, as needs and the available helpers scale upward, there might be scenarios where, say, certain needs are more urgent than others, or the system may want to start thinking about, okay, how do I be strategic about distributing help across the different available helpers in the community if there are many. So, for example, there may be many needs for a spectator to support as the runners scale upwards. And they may need support in kind of filtering out the opportunities based on factors like maybe who's best equipped to support a particular runner in that moment, or maybe which runners haven't been cheered for in a while, or which spectators haven't cheered as much. In some of these cases, it might be actually better to kind of postpone needs that aren't as urgent as others if we expect that maybe later there will be some helpers that have the opportunity to provide that support. So if it's not as urgent, we could kind of delay for those moments where we expect another helper is available. And so as these needs and helpers scale, future continual support systems can really think about integrating different coordination algorithms and think about what are the various ways to kind of how do we best satisfy the needs of that exist within a community given the existing support resources, and maybe even surface the trade offs between different approaches and potential consequences for individuals in the broader community as you're kind of making these uh, coordination decisions. And then we also envision future continual support systems to take mixed initiative approaches to handle really diverse and complex sets of needs. So we saw that being able to model and monitor the primary goals of spectators is really effective for enabling like an ad hoc crowd of spectators to provide support to, for example, runners. However, as the needs and goals grow complex and really diversify, individuals may have multiple goals, or the types of needs may not just be a simple need of I'm a runner that needs cheering. There might be many different types of needs that vary from person to person, which can make it much harder to start to think about, okay, how do we actually model and track all of these different needs automatically? So, for example, there may be complex needs in learning and workplace settings that are much harder to track. Like, how do we start to think about when to detect the need that a student may be struggling, or maybe why they're struggling, to determine what support they might need? And that type of tracking and detection might require tacit knowledge of community members to be able to diagnose, like the expertise of a mentor. And as another example, a person may have other goals that affect their ability to provide help. So in our race setting, we actually observed one case where there was a spectator who had additional goals that weren't modeled by our system. She was trying to help her nephew who was with her and kind of watching over him and helping him kind of stay engaged through the race, which was an additional task, a primary task for her that wasn't represented in our model. So while our model didn't include these types of additional goals, it still allowed users like the spectator to have this flexibility in evaluating and making decisions about when they might want to provide support, as opposed to just being assigned tasks or saying to the spectator, like, hey, you need to cheer for this runner right now. So that flexibility is actually quite important. If we can only have these models of needs and track needs in this partial way, if we can only partially model and track needs and goals automatically, it's important for future continuous support systems to support this type of flexibility in decision making, or for us to be able to think about, well, how do we extend continuous support systems to enable these mixed initiative approaches so we can think about how to supplement our automated models with human input when necessary. And so for the continual support approach, we believe that it really shows promise for overcoming these challenges in how do you know about different support opportunities? How do you evaluate the opportunities when you're considering your own goals and the needs of others? And how do you really prepare to support needs on demand when you're switching back and forth between these types of tasks? And we believe that continual support systems can really enable ad hoc crowds within communities that are capable of supporting community needs alongside their own goals. So if we can continuously model changing needs and ongoing goals in the community, we believe that we can better connect community needs to ad hoc crowds of community members who are really willing, able, and available to volunteer their support at these opportune moments. And that doing so could increase support opportunities that an individual is likely to engage in, which has the possibility to scale support within existing community resources. And that's all. Thank you.